Hello and welcome to the CX Files podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hillary. This week I'm speaking with Rod Jones, a man who is quite literally legendary in the world of contact centers and CX. Rod is based in Johannesburg in South Africa. He's a consultant and advisor on contact centers globally, and he's been doing this for over 40 years now. Contact Center Helper magazine once called him the most trusted contact center advisor globally, and his work takes him all over the world, both to work with clients and to speak about his experience at conferences. Rod recently mentioned to me that there are a few problems that come up in almost every engagement he works on, so I called him to ask about these common issues. Okay, let's go straight to the interview with Rod Jones. Okay, Rod, so we've had a lot of conversations about contact center management, and you've said to me that there's always 5 key operational challenges that come up every time you're talking to a customer service leader or manager. Can you explain these 5 challenges, and why do you think we keep on facing the same ones?
Yes. So it is, in fact, 5 key things which I've seen for the last 20 years, and they keep recurring. And these are the big challenges I see. Cap or reduce operational costs is always the number one. Increase efficiencies, drive up whatever is necessary in changes in processes or technology. Increase revenue, depending on how you measure that. Reduce and mitigate risk. And increase your customer satisfaction, once again, however you measure it. So those I've seen for the last 20 years as always the top agenda items when we're engaging at an executive level.
Okay.
So, why do we keep facing the same challenges? In my opinion, the average contact center, and those that particularly that I'm engaging with, are constantly putting out fires. It's day-to-day operational issues, trying to hit KPIs, with very little time left to really look at the strategic elements of the operations. That's the first reason. And the second, we're still seeing a lot of operational silos within the corporate structures. So it almost drives a lack of strategy because there isn't a cohesive thought process behind dismantling silos. So those two run hand in glove. And they, in my opinion, are the impact on why we constantly have this putting out fires syndrome.
Okay, well that connects to what I wanted to ask you then about the costs, because when the customer service was just focused on managing a contact center, we often saw this focus on using an outsourced provider to create savings and efficiencies. But now if you look at the way that brands are interacting and managing the customer relationship, it's much more complex. Is there really an opportunity to save nowadays, or does this complexity means that you have to work with an outsourced expert?
I think there is a double-edged sword here, and there are 2 answers to the one question. I'm still a great advocate for identifying low-complexity transactions, however we do that, and then either implementing a self-service interventions, or in fact taking that as the component that you outsource. So that would be very simple, as I said, low complexity, balance inquiries, simple stuff like that. If it can't be done internally through bots or using AI or self-service channels, then by all means, let's offshore it, outsource it, and accept the upside and the downside of that as well. But I think that also points to, outsource is one thing to one professional, and it's another thing to another. So when we talk outsourcers, I'm talking what I call the tier 1 outsourcer. The operators that really know what they're doing, that are well invested in technologies, have well-proven track records, and therefore capable of taking on even more complex transactions.
Yeah. So you're talking about someone who's more like a partner, an advisor, rather than just someone who's saying, I can save you a bunch of money by taking your customer service away.
This is it. And I think we're still getting a lot of that syndrome of, I think our good friend and colleague Peter Ryan refers to it as, take my mess and do it for less.
Yeah.
And that's something I think we have to be very, very cautious of when we raise the outsource flag, is are we doing it for the right reasons?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you mentioned in your list of 5 operational challenges there about risk. Do you think that some of the new technologies that we're seeing in the contact center, like artificial intelligence, for example, are helping to reduce risk in the contact center? And a good example might be if an agent working for an airline can actually have the information cross-checked by a system before they're giving prices to the customer.
I think it's going to need a lot more investment and maturity in AI, but certainly we're starting to see risk mitigation through some of the technologies like the astute voice, use of voice biometrics, sentiment analytics coming through on that as platforms as well, and of course the real-time analytics, being able to prompt agents with appropriate information onto screen during the transaction. So technology certainly is going to play a major role in risk mitigation in that context.
Okay. So you think that definitely there's stuff that they can do immediately in the contact center, but then it also might develop as well?
We're certainly seeing the early stages of using AI and related technologies specifically focused on risk mitigation, definitely.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, quite often when we're talking about the metrics used in a contact center, everything's quite short. We're looking at individual calls, for example. But I spoke with Google recently, and they were talking about measuring a 50-year relationship. So they're actually sort of looking at the entire relationship the company has with their customers rather than just measuring each individual call. When do you think we're going to start having metrics that measure this wider relationship and like ongoing relationship rather than just looking at each interaction?
Well, I think you've raised something which is one of my hobby horses. I mentioned earlier in our discussion that my number one metric key driver is capital reduced costs. Tragically, very few operators actually know what those costs are. They might nod their heads in agreement that we need to cut costs, but what are they? The second component of that is the ROI. Very few are actually modeling any type of operations into ROI models. So if we take those two and overlay it with the old-fashioned, I mean, we started using lifetime value modeling 30 years ago, but it's never really been well matured. So when Google talks about a 50-year relationship, it is actually something we've been talking about for 50 years. And it's been extremely difficult to calculate. However, where we're starting to see deep analytics coming into our space and a greater understanding in the boardroom of the lifetime value of customers, I think that 50-year lifetime value or relationship is on the cards, certainly in the not too distant future.
Uh-huh. Do you think that might change how we pay for contact centers? I mean, for example, it's still very common just to talk about the FTE and just the price on headcount. But do you think that some of the clients are actually starting to really talk about, I want a partnership with this contact center and I want them to really create value over the long term?
I'm hearing a lot of talk about that. There are very few operations where I'm actually seeing it in practice. So the outcomes-based model, tragically, and I say tragically in inverted commas, the number of the big outsourced contracts that I'm seeing are still based on NPS scores, which is a debate for another day. If one could call that outcomes-based, I think then there is a trend towards performance-based remuneration to the outsourced partners. Mm-hmm. It's starting to happen, and I think ultimately we must get there, and analytics will help us get there.
Okay, yeah. I mean, well, that's probably another podcast on NPS, but yeah, certainly there's a lot of critics. I mean, just finally then, what's bugging your clients regarding customer experience this year? I mean, it's June now, which is surprising. I don't know where the first half of the year went, but what can we expect to hear more of as we go in now into the second half of 2019?
Well, I think there's still the frustration from the operational side of things, and the frustration is that the boardroom is still locked into the thinking that CX or customer experience is a new name for the well-failed CRM. And so I think that is one of the reasons we're not getting support and executive buy-in to CX initiatives that are being strategized at a lower level, but not being supported and funded. So big problems that the clients in the operational side that I'm working with at the moment is this lack of understanding at an executive level of what needs to be done. So that lack of executive buy-in. So that's, in my opinion, the first and possibly the most powerful restraining factor. The second component of it is, I can get into trouble here, although we say there's a skills shortage in the customer experience space, every second Tom, Dick and Harry has become a customer experience expert of note. And I think a lot of the programs that are being suggested or proposed into the corporate environment just don't have the maturity of a true CX program, looking, for example, at that lifetime value of customer and ROI modeling. So, in my opinion, there's a lot of amateurs out there meddling in potentially the future of many organizations.
Do you think that accounts for some organizations rolling out measures like chatbots to answer all calls, even if it annoys the customers?
Absolutely. And I think some of these Tom, Dick and Harry so-called consultants are going for the low-hanging fruit, the quick fixes, the sexy technologies, without really getting to grips with the overall organizational strategic intent.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree with you. A lot of these quick fixes are doing more harm than good in the longer-term view of the customer relationships.
And what does it take then to rehabilitate CRM? Because I know that there was many corporate CRM disasters in the past, but it seems that we've got better systems now that automatically capture information about customers. So we should have better insights, shouldn't we?
Ideally, yes. I go back to a point I raised earlier, the conflict between organizational silos, where we may have marketing having a view of a long-term relationship with customer. We have sales having a diametrically opposed view to a long-term relationship with sales. And these two are going to be fighting each other with contact center or customer interaction center stuck right in the middle, still trying to put out the fires as opposed to operating at a strategic level.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because a couple of years ago, Gartner said that we need to create a customer relationship hub within organizations, and that would actually manage all customer interactions. So sales, marketing, customer service, even things like advertising and PR, like anything that faces the customer should be coordinated and managed together. And that's because the customer journey has changed. We're not just talking about post-sale complaint phone calls anymore. So have you seen that as a reality anywhere, or is it something we're still looking forward to?
I actually haven't seen it in an operational sense. I mean, I think many of our colleagues talk about the one agenda customer experience, dismantling those silos, taking down the ring-fenced power bases of sales, service, marketing, PR. Of course, the one which really bugs me is social media set aside on a different floor in the organization and handled completely differently. So the breaking down those barriers is to get the boardroom to really understand that there's a new game in town and it is a single agenda.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. Please take a moment to review the podcast because this helps other listeners to find it. And if you have any suggestions, then get in touch with me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm at Mark Hillary with 2 L's, or just search Google for Mark Hillary.